Every week, Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This week, the entire episode is a roundtable focused on a major news story, the approval of Semaglutide for the treatment of non-cirrhotic MASH, making it the second approved agent in the U.S. and pushing MASH therapy onto a whole new exciting plateau.
For the last 5 years, MASLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to Surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we have divided our special episode on semaglutide's approval in the U.S. into 3 chapters so you can listen to each one over a shorter, discrete period of time. We hope you enjoy them.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations.
Regeneron is a leading biotechnology company that invents, develops, and commercializes life-transforming medicines for serious diseases. Founded and led by physician scientists, their unique ability to repeatedly translate science into medicine has led to numerous approved treatments and product candidates in development, most of which were homegrown in their laboratories. They are shaping the next frontier of medicine with data-powered insights from the Regeneron Genetics Center and pioneering genetic medicine platforms, enabling them to identify innovative targets and complementary approaches to potentially treat diseases like obesity and MASH.
LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. LiverRight is America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight. That's liver then R-I-G-H-T as if one word, at www.liverright.com.
Tawazun Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazun Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers, now in over 30 countries around the globe. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about Tawazun Health or our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazun Health link on the Surfing MASH homepage. This conversation shares the third and final segment of our special roundtable, exploring the likely impact of the recent FDA approval of semaglutide for patients living with non-cirrhotic MASH.
In the final part of our dialogue, the panelists were asked to identify some of the changes that they foresee if we are going to manage this tsunami of undiagnosed MASLD patients over the next few years. Many of the comments touched on the themes earlier in the episode, specifically APPs, education, AI, but a few are unique. Zobair Younossi states we must remember that the vast majority of MASLD patients will never develop MASH. So for those patients, we really simply need to track the disease and make sure it isn't getting any worse. Manal Abdelmalek also says that we can be a lot more sophisticated in choosing pharmacotherapies as we get more drugs that work in different ways. And Scott Isaacs anticipates a paradigm shift in which endocrinologists will view MASH similarly to how they view retinopathy and other diabetic comorbidities. First of all, in a recent episode, we had Tim Jobson from Predictive Health Intelligence in the UK on. And in Somerset region in England, just using data in NHS, they were able to identify a significant number of patients who were clearly at high risk of liver disease who weren't being seen or treated or identified that way. And of those that primary care actually called and said, we think there may be an issue here, you might want to come in, something like 2/3 of them actually showed up. So I think that speaks to your point that goes, if we can find efficient ways to identify people, they will be responsive. What NHS has that we don't have in this country is a relatively low-cost way of getting all those patients accessed. So I think that going back to what we've been talking about, the cost model is going to have to drive down the cost of getting patients treated, whether that's by APPs or AI or both, or combinations of technologies we haven't even thought of yet. Given how many patients we're talking about, the cost is going to have to get down to get MASLD evaluated. But that if we can do that, I think patients will be responsive. I can't see why patients in the U.S. would be meaningfully less responsive than they were in the U.K., for example.
No, I agree. I think there will be, the compliance and adherence issues will always be an issue. That's the reality of practice of medicine. But I think what UK and places like Sweden and other places, Scandinavia has, they have been pioneers in terms of, sort of having access to data, because in order to risk stratify a patient, you need data. And an electronic data that's not just, my institution and that institution. There are national databases that they have access to so that individual can actually get stratified easily. So people are working on that in this country, and I am hoping that that's going to be but it is you have these sort of risk stratification models included in the electronic medical record of institutions, but they're probably foreign. And there are not too many of them right now, and it certainly is not at a national level. I think this is going to be something that we could benefit from the advance in technology and this specific field of liver disease with MASLD.
So Scott, what will and won't change in endocrinology as a result of all this, do you think?
Well, first of all, I just want to comment on what Zobair said. I think you make some really good points. And, with the numbers that we're seeing, really the only way to expand this is going to be involving primary care, and not only involving primary care, using the technology, like you said, so that people can be screened efficiently, but also just making it part of the routine guidelines, just like we screen our patients with diabetes for diabetic kidney disease. They need to be screened, and we need to be starting with very simple tests like the FIB4 that everybody can do. And then, of course, we want people to have access for elastography and more advanced tests. But just getting that basic universal screening for high-risk patients, I think, is really, we haven't gotten there yet, and we need to be moving more in that direction. I think when it comes to endocrinology, what I'm seeing is just an increased awareness of MASLD. 5 years ago, I think most people didn't really know much about it. They just knew simply just fat in the liver. And I think a lot of people didn't even realize the association with diabetes or metabolic disease. But as time has progressed over the last several years, especially with the approval of resmetirom and now with semaglutide, it's bringing this awareness into the forefront of of doctors, of endocrinologists, and of primary care. And now they're seeing these patients with mildly elevated liver enzymes, and they're not being ignored as much. I see more endocrinologists that are purchasing elastography machines to use in their offices. And also, I say the same with bariatric medicine. A lot of them now are getting in the machine because not only does it help them with screening patients, but it also helps with the bottom line. You talk about E&M and having trouble surviving, but when they have an extra revenue source in the office, like doing elastography, it incentivizes them both from the patient care perspective, but also from the financial perspective. So it's difficult for them to make the investment, but if they can do it, it's really, I think, beneficial from all those aspects. So seeing this increased awareness, seeing increased screening, and now with more drugs and increased treatment, I think the future is really promising for MASLD and endocrinology.
So what happens next year, right? I mean, we're talking about lots of things, all of which are going to happen over time, but I'm not smart enough to do this, but people who are really good at this figure out, okay, what are the next three things that are going to happen? And by that, I don't just mean more drugs. I mean, a lot of things are going on at once, right? We've got issues around drugs. We've got issues around screening. We've got issues around who treats. Where do you expect to see the next couple of cracks or breaks, if you will, towards better treatment? Where should people be looking?
I mean, I think with these new developments, hepatologists are going to use more GLP-1s, which is a good thing. I think also endocrinologists are going to start thinking about MASLD and MASH in their patients on a GLP-1 and realizing that, this is not the answer to all MASLD and MASH, and that many of these patients will probably benefit from resmetirom or clinical trials. And I think the size of the pie is going to grow because now we have more awareness, more companies behind educating about this disease. We see some commercials, as Dr. Younossi said, on Facebook and Instagram and places you don't expect to see advertisement about MASH, which I think is also good. So these will be the three things I see changing, at least in the near future.
I see that we're going to do a deeper dive into some refinement on our approach, too, as we figure out which pharmacotherapy is the best alignment with a patient's disease or clinical phenotype. GLP-1, there are no GLP-1 receptors in the liver. And to get a therapeutic response, maybe with a patient who is not as insulin resistant, maybe leaner, or have F3 fibrosis, may require a combination or approach that we're using both anti-metabolic therapies and liver-directed pharmacotherapies in combination. And we got to understand, which drug to start with, A, B, or combination approaches. And there's probably going to be more refinement in doing this. And there's certainly going to be more interest on third-party payers, especially if we're going to be using 2 therapies for one indication. They're going to want to know more answers.
I think if I can add to what Manal and Naim and Scott said, is that we probably will see 3 things. But, resmetirom has been around for over a year. Has it taken off? Yes. Are we there optimally? Not at all. I think there are plenty of patients that should be treated who are not treated right now. So I think we still have opportunity to educate not only primary care endocrinology and but also gastroenterologists who, believe it or not, sometimes they're not really paying attention to this disease as much as they should. So I think with the 2 companies now being involved here, and all societies, both in GI and hepatology as well as endocrinology, getting more and more involved, and guidelines and guidance and algorithms to raise awareness, I think we'll see more awareness, I'm hoping. Second, I think we need to get better implementation of algorithm within ITs that we already have, where it's actually starting with a FIP4 and going to transelastropathy or an ALT test, or develop new ones. I think you see movement in that direction so that you get better refinement of these in IT algorithms with, the next, hopefully, couple of years. And third, of course, is to really expand the care pathway so that as you get these new drugs come in, you develop sort of a care pathway that would put the patient with the right provider. I really don't care who that provider is, as long as that provider is willing and is capable of providing the care. Knowing the manpower issue in medicine in the United States and even in Europe, I certainly foresee that, yes, we would expand to primary care and endocrinology and others, but I think the biggest expansion that needs to happen, and folks are actually quite eager to do it, is in the APPs, because they are eager to actually specialize in this area because they know the potential. I don't see the number of GI and hepatology fellowships go up immediately. I don't really see, somehow opening in our primary care physicians' offices and increase by 10-20%. So I don't really see that. I only see the 2 solutions is to leverage the technology, to use it with the algorithms that we have, and really expand our APP pool right now. But anything else we do outside this, whether it's endocrinology or primary care or anybody else, I think, more power to them. Bring them in under the same umbrella, because hepatology alone is not going to be able to deal with this disease.
So one thought I have is this. We had Naga Chalasani on a couple of months ago talking about the article that he and his team put in, I think it was CGH, I could be wrong on the publication, about their experiences with resmetirom. And one of the comments he made was that for a MASH patient, they were doing 45 minutes on initial interview, 30 minutes on follow-up. I suspect that it's not simply a question of getting APPs, but it's a question of getting the skills that we teach people about interviewing and conversation and how to make them comfortable. That's going to take, the training is going to have to take a kick in that direction as well. If we really want to be maximally efficient at getting and effective at getting people to talk about exactly what their situations are and what they need to do to control them.
But it's very important to understand that especially the initial management is just not to say, okay, well, you have a FIP4 of this and you haven't, I'm going to do a transelastropathy and that's your number. There are other things that we want to do to manage these patients' totality of their issues, which means, talking about lifestyle, especially alcohol. I mean, how to actually assess alcohol consumption, these patients are going to be critical moving forward, both in clinical practice as well as in clinical research. But so it does take a bit of time. It does take training, once and the follow-ups are the same. So I think you need to not only sort of teach our providers, our APPs or other, how to sort of decide on whether the patient, qualifies for treatment or not for either liver-directed or metabolic treatment, but also all these other things that we were not doing very well in the past. Just because we don't have the time to do it, maybe that's an opportunity to really sort of manage this in sort of a metabolic clinic concept, as Scott was talking about, so that people know that when they have diabetes, if they get their annual eye exams done for diabetic retinopathy, or their kidneys checked, that they're going to have their liver checked. But then you still have to manage their at least pay attention that they're being followed by somebody for their potential kidney or eye, or potential for neuropathy and other things. And that is probably much more complicated than a hepatitis C patient that I used to treat in some ways.
Okay, Scott, thoughts, comments, and what it means specifically on Zobair's point about metabolic practices and how that might take shape.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a paradigm shift to start looking at liver disease on the same level as neuropathy and retinopathy and nephropathy. But that's exactly what we're trying to do. And with diabetes guidelines and algorithms and recommendations, MASLD screening, I mean, I am involved in efforts to try to get that right up there on equal footing with other complications of diabetes. And if we can do that in an efficient way so that it becomes part of the everyday practice of practitioners who treat patients with diabetes, then I think that's going to go a long way, because it has to be integrated into everyday practice. There's just not enough time, as everyone's saying, there's just not enough practitioners to make this something totally separate. So if we make this part of the everyday practice, I think it's going to do a lot.
Okay, closing question. If we were having this conversation a year from now, what's the one most important thing that will have changed in the U.S. in the next year about treatment of the disease, either as a result of these approvals and the increasing attention, or anything else that's going to happen?
I think in a year, I'll be hopeful that there'll be more awareness about this disease in general. I don't think that we're going to do anything else in terms of bringing new drugs. Maybe we'll be more comfortable in using one drug or combining two drugs. Maybe we'll be more comfortable in using more and more NITs, maybe two NITs, that now we're going in this sort of an algorithm that we find ways to actually combine and get better clarity. So in a year, that's where I think we will have more off. I don't think that there's going to be any earth-shattering changes in a year with new treatment. But what we have, I'm hoping that will be used better and more frequently in an appropriate setting, so that we can treat more patients, not only in the United States, but across the globe.
Okay, next thought. What's one thing that's different in a year?
In a year, we will have had almost 30 months of post-approval for resmetirom. So we are going to have a better handle on our real-world experience with a liver-directed pharmacotherapy for NASH, and whether we start to see a shift in burden. We'll have better understanding of health economics. We'll have better understanding of utilization and comfort, and the outcomes of the increased awareness and education. And I think we will have opportunities for add-on therapies, and maybe even at that point we'll get readouts for other ongoing clinical trials that we will be able to see a landscape and paradigm of combination therapy starting to emerge. But I think 2.5 years of post-approval resmetirom is going to further increase our knowledge of whether we're making an impact or not in this disease burden.
Naim or Scott, one thing we'll see in a year that matters most.
Yeah, I think, in a year we talked about, more providers being comfortable prescribing GLP-1 and resmetirom and increase awareness. But here are my predictions in 5 years, because I think so much is going to happen in 5 years, not much in 1 year. In 5 years, I think liver biopsy will be completely out in terms of designing clinical trials. I think NITs will become available in primary care settings. I do believe that we will have probably 4 or 5 options to choose from by then with different mechanisms of action. And I do believe that we will have at least one FDA-approved treatment for MASH cirrhosis. So although 1 year, not much in terms of the pipeline, 5 years, I think, are going to be transformational, and the entire field is going to look completely different by 2030.
Fantastic. From your, as my people say, from your mouth to God's ears. Scott, go ahead.
Well, I think that you all have said some very thoughtful things about the future. And I agree that in 1 year, we may not see a lot as far as new drugs, but I do think that the main change we're going to see in a year is knowledge and education. And it's already starting, as I mentioned, with the primary care providers and with endocrinology, and we're a little bit still behind the hepatologists. But where I really see the education and knowledge increasing is with the public, with the general population, because now that we have this very popular drug that's been approved, people know about semaglutide. People use it and talk about it. It's all over social media. People get the compounded version. They do whatever they can to get this drug. So now that the word is out that this drug is now available for steatotic liver disease, there's going to be a whole bunch of people saying, hey, what is steatotic liver disease? Hey, do I have this? And so I think people are going to be asking their doctors to be tested. And if they have it, they're going to be asking their doctors specifically for the medication. So that's the change that I see over the next year.
You know, it's interesting you say that. One of the clients I work with brought in some sales professionals who had no medical background to speak of, who 3 weeks in were running and getting themselves tested because this was just a new idea, right? And they got the whole thing, right? Like, gee, if I'm pre-diabetic, does that mean I need to be more worried about this? It was interesting looking because, you know, we live with people who know about this, right? We all do. So watching intelligent, informed, successful people who came out of a completely different paradigm in life look at this disease for the first time, it becomes like the old med school phenomenon about if you learn about it, you get it. But that's been happening here. And I couldn't agree with you more, Scott, that as we see more education and more publicity, that people are going to become more knowledgeable. Now, sadly, because this is how the world works, some of them will get bad knowledge, but many will actually get knowledge that they can use and act on and take to the right places. And then it's going to be a question of, can we get enough frontline treaters at a price point that makes sense that folks can actually get treatment, you know, and that probably will take more than a year. But I think I think you're right, the pressure from the consumers will be massive. You folks have been fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
On behalf of the surfers, our guests, and our sponsors, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, Liver Right, and Tawazun Health, thanks for joining us this week.
Please join us again next week. We may have another special roundtable on the resmetirom EMA decision, or this week's FDA guidance on NITs and clinical trials, or our regularly scheduled episode discussing what Roger and Louise each considered the major story of the first half of 2025.
And until next week, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you again on Surfing the Tsunami podcast. Bye-bye now.